Yeah, yikes. That's all I gotta say. Caitlin Clark fans showing no mercy whatsoever, right? It is funny. There's a comment we're going to look at as we're going through the comments saying, oh, here comes all the troll poet.
378,000 versus 65,000. Same team, same post format, same exact moment in time. That gap isn't a popularity contest. It's a financial document, and the Indiana Fever's own social media account just published it for the entire world to read. Here's what nobody in the mainstream WNBA conversation wants to admit. When a franchise posts individual player graphics to build hype and one player pulls 6 times the engagement of everyone else on the roster combined, that is not a branding opportunity. That is a warning signal. And the front office either doesn't see it, or they're hoping you don't. By the time this video is over, you'll know exactly why signing another guard isn't just a questionable roster decision. It's proof that something is structurally broken at the top of this franchise. Stay with me, because the receipts are all right here. Let's start with a number that should be hanging in the Fever war room like a weather warning. Caitlin Clark's opening night graphic, 378,000 views. Now scroll down the same feed. Justine Piasaiti, 65,000. Lexi Hull, Sophie Cunningham, Raven Johnson. All pulling numbers that combined still don't touch Clark's single post. Not even close. The fans didn't vote with their voices. They voted with their attention. And attention, in the modern media economy, is the only currency that actually matters. Here's the dual reality the front office is sitting with right now, and it's brutal. Not only is Caitlin Clark driving the overwhelming majority of digital traffic for this franchise,
it is ugly. Let's look at this. Our opening night roster is set. This just dropped. Kelsey Mitchell, Hines Allen, Raven Johnson, Aaliyah Boston, Sophie Cunningham, Lexi Hull, Demarius Dantas, Justine Passat, Michaela Timpson, Caitlin Clark, Monique Billings, Shatori Walker-Kimbrough, and Ty Harris. That is your opening night 2026 roster. Right there. Championships.
But the engagement gap is actually widening as the roster fills out. Game over for the team-first equal opportunity narrative they've been trying to sell. The math simply doesn't support the message. Now, someone in the comments is already typing that this is just casual fan behavior, that casual viewers click on the biggest name, and that's all this proves. And that argument would hold water, except for one thing. The viewers driving these numbers aren't casuals. They're analyzing pick-and-roll spacing. They're breaking down off-ball movement. They know the difference between a read and react system and a rigid set-play offense. This isn't a fan base that just wants to see their favorite player smile on a graphic. They want to see her used correctly. And right now, they're not convinced she will be. So why? In the middle of all of this tension, all of this scrutiny, all of this fan pressure, does the front office go out and sign another guard? Think about what that roster already looks like. Kelsey Mitchell, Raven Johnson, Caitlin Clark.
Insight into popularity. A couple of things really caught my attention. Let's go here. Caitlin Clark, 378,000 views on this post, okay? I scrolled down. Number one, Justine Passat, 65,000. I mean, that's pretty interesting because Lexi Hull's got 73. Justine's right on her tail, right? But this was what was really interesting. Sophie Cunningham, 357,000 views on the number 8 post right here. It's clear Caitlin Clark and Sophie Cunningham are I believe, we all know Caitlin.
You have 3 guards with legitimate on-ball creation ability already competing for overlapping roles. The offensive identity question isn't answered by adding depth at the same position. It gets more complicated. Every additional guard on this roster is another conversation the coaching staff has to have about minutes, about roles, about who defers to whom. And that conversation right now has only one answer that makes the franchise economically viable. Everybody in that building knows it. Nobody will say it directly. Here's the piece hiding in plain sight on that depth chart. When you stack up the guard-heavy construction of this roster against the offensive system Stephanie White has historically preferred, something doesn't add up. White's reputation is built on structure.
Out and running. Here's Diamond to Shields for the easy two.
Controlling pace. But the roster she's been handed, or the roster she's helped construct, depending on who you believe, screams pace and space. It screams push the ball, read the defense, let the playmaker make plays. Those two philosophies are not naturally compatible. And nobody is publicly asking the one question that matters most. Whose vision actually won? What the front office should have done, what a franchise operating with clarity would have done, is declare the identity first, then build a roster around it. You don't collect talent and then figure out the system. You build the system, then acquire the pieces that make it unstoppable. The Fever had a chance to do that. The asset was already there. The blueprint was already visible. And instead, they signed another guard. The view counts are only half the story. What the replies actually say, and what the fan base has started organizing around, is where this gets genuinely uncomfortable for the front office. Picture this. It's a late-season game, 2025. Caitlin Clark has the ball at the top of the key, two defenders shading her way, and an open cutting lane developing on the weak side. The play called sends her to the corner. She goes. She's a professional. But 12,000 people watching live see it, and they don't forget it. That image, repeated enough times, is exactly how a fan rebellion starts. Not with one bad game, with a pattern that refuses to go away. Stephanie White is not an incompetent coach. That needs to be said clearly because nuance matters here. She has system knowledge. She has defensive credibility. She has relationships with players that go back years. But here's the problem that the WNBA media establishment keeps carefully talking around. Having knowledge of the game and having the specific tactical fluency to maximize a generational point guard are two entirely different skill sets. And right now, the evidence that she has a second one is thin. Film watchers, the ones actually breaking down the footage, have been making the same argument for months now. The spacing in half-court sets repeatedly collapses Clark's driving lanes. The off-ball assignments pull her away from the areas of the court where her gravity does the most damage. And the pick-and-roll coverage schemes being run against Indiana are consistently designed to take the ball out of her hands in the mid-range, which keeps working. Which means opposing coaches have identified something exploitable, which means the adjustment burden falls on the coaching staff. So far, the adjustments have been incremental at best. And here's the piece that should make every Fever fan lean forward. According to analysts who have tracked half-court offensive efficiency across the last two WNBA seasons, teams that fail to build their primary offensive system around their highest usage playmaker consistently underperform their projected win totals by double digits over a full season. Not occasionally. Consistently. The data doesn't care about roster construction press releases. If the view count breakdown surprised you, you already understand why this channel exists. Hit subscribe, because what's coming next in this series goes even deeper, and you don't want to be the last one in the room who knows it. Now here's the twist that almost nobody is talking about, and it's the second win moment of this entire story. The most commonly overlooked mistake in WNBA franchise building isn't drafting wrong. It isn't overpaying in free agency. It's designing a roster around a coach's comfort zone instead of around the player who makes the franchise financially viable. And that mistake is invisible until it isn't. Until the losses stack up and the explanations stop making sense and the fan base, which has been doing the film work themselves, start saying out loud what the front office has been quietly hoping they wouldn't notice. There's a version of this Fever roster that is genuinely dangerous. Kelsey Mitchell attacking closeouts. Aaliyah Boston operating as an interior anchor and short roll threat. Clark running the two-man game from the elbow with a screener she trusts. Raven Johnson providing defensive intensity and secondary playmaking off the bench. That version of this team is a playoff threat with championship upside. But that version requires a coaching staff that is willing to build the entire offensive infrastructure around one player's strengths, and then have every other player buy into a role that supports that infrastructure. It requires a coach who doesn't just tolerate the star. It requires a coach who is obsessed with unleashing her. History is worth paying attention to here. When generational offensive talents are placed inside systems that don't fit their movement patterns, the talent doesn't lift the system suppresses the talent. It happened with creative playmakers across multiple eras in both the NBA and WNBA. The system always wins the short battle. The player always pays the long-term cost. And franchises that let it happen long enough eventually have to make a painful, expensive, public correction that they could have avoided entirely if they had just asked the harder question earlier. The harder question here is simple. Is Stephanie White the right coach to run an offense built around the most watched player in women's basketball history? The front office has an answer. They just haven't said it with words. They've said it with roster decisions. And if you think the coaching situation is the ceiling of this problem, you haven't seen what the latest signing actually signals about the front office. What does it actually look like when a fan base stops being passive and starts being ungovernable? Not angry tweets, not podcast rants. Something more organized, more data-literate, and frankly more threatening to a front office than any protest could ever be. It looks like a fan base that pulls the engagement metrics themselves, posts the comparisons publicly, and builds an airtight case before the first game of the season has even been played. That is exactly where Fever Nation is right now. And the franchise has nobody to blame but their own social media strategy. Here is the question worth sitting with before we go any further. Is this a fan rebellion? Or is this a legitimate organizational crisis wearing the costume of a fan rebellion? Because those two things require completely different responses. A rebellion can be weathered. You release a statement. You let the noise cycle through. You win a few games and the temperature drops. A structural crisis doesn't work that way. A structural crisis compounds. Every bad decision adds weight to the last one, and eventually the whole structure becomes visible, not just to people watching from outside, but to players inside the locker room who are trying to figure out whether this organization has a real plan or just a very expensive collection of individual talents pointed in slightly different directions. The new guard signing is the tell. Not because adding depth is wrong. Depth is necessary. Depth wins games in a grueling WNBA season. It's a tell because of the timing, because of the position, and because of what it reveals about the decision-making framework operating inside this front office right now. When your offensive identity is already under public scrutiny, when your fan base is openly questioning whether your star player is being used correctly, the organizational response should be clarity. A move that sharpens a vision. A move that says, we hear you, we know what we're building, and this is the next piece of it. Signing a guard into an already guard-heavy rotation is the opposite of clarity. It is noise, and noise at this stage is indistinguishable from panic. Now here's the dual reality that winning franchises understand, and struggling franchises consistently miss. And this is the piece that reframes everything we've covered today. Not only do elite organizations build their roster identity around their most irreplaceable asset, but they also make every subsequent move a public declaration of that commitment. Every signing, every trade, every roster cut sends a message to the fan base, to the locker room, and to the rest of the league about what you actually believe. The Las Vegas Aces didn't build a dynasty by collecting talent and hoping chemistry emerged. They declared an identity, built relentlessly toward it, and made sure every player on the roster understood their specific role inside a specific vision. The Fever have the most valuable asset in the league. The question is whether they have the organizational clarity to build something worthy of her. Here's the unexpected twist that pulls everything together. The conversation everyone is having about Stephanie White, the frustration, the film breakdowns, the social media pressure, is actually a proxy conversation. The real conversation is about organizational philosophy. A head coach operates within the framework the front office builds around her. If the front office keeps sending mixed signals through their roster construction, no coaching staff in the league can manufacture coherence out of that. White may be the most visible face of the scrutiny right now, but the decisions that created this situation didn't start on the practice court. They started in the front office. And until that layer of the organization demonstrates it has a clear, committed, player-first vision for what this franchise is supposed to be, the coaching conversation will keep circling without resolution. What we actually witnessed this week, underneath the roster announcement and the engagement numbers and the fan frustration, was a franchise at a crossroads that doesn't yet know which road it's on. The view gap between Clark and every other player on the roster isn't a branding problem to be managed. It's a strategic reality to be embraced. The coaching system tension isn't a media narrative to be dismissed. It's a compatibility question that needs an honest answer before the losses force one. And the latest guard signing isn't just a depth move. It's a signal, whether the front office intended it that way or not, that the vision is still blurry at the top. Fever Nation already knows all of this. They've done the work. They pulled the numbers, watched the film, and built the argument before the first tip-off of the season. The only question left is whether the people running this franchise are paying attention, or whether they're going to need a far more painful lesson before they finally do.